Welcome back to La Belle Vie. Today is going to be my first real video on Donna Adelson in relation to the murder for hire of FSU law professor Dan Markel on July 18, 2014. Now, Donna Adelson is the former mother-in-law to Dan Markel, who was married to her daughter, Wendi. Donna was arrested on November 13, 2023 for murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation of murder, which was just 1 week after her son, Charlie Adelson, was convicted on the same charges in the murder for hire of Dan Markel. Importantly, Donna was arrested as she was boarding a one-way flight with her husband Harvey to Vietnam via Dubai in an apparent attempt to avoid apprehension. Today I'm going to briefly go over the probable cause affidavit for Donna's arrest warrant, as well as the warrants for her iPhone and 2 additional iPhones and an iPad that were seized from Harvey Adelson at the Adelson's luxury condo in Miami, Florida. I'm going to focus on what is new in these documents, and by new, I don't necessarily mean things that we weren't already aware, although there are a few examples of those, but rather new in the sense that they haven't appeared before in prior case pleadings, and in my view, they shed light on the ever-evolving roadmap of the state's prosecution strategy. So let's get started. So starting first with the probable cause affidavit for Donna's actual arrest. Now, I wanted to compare it to the others that we have seen and basically check out what's new. Now, going back, we haven't had a PCA since Katie's arrest, because if you recall, Charlie had already been indicted by a grand jury the day before his arrest in April of 2022. Okay, so starting off new here. This is kind of the first part where we see some new information. First of all, I don't recall them ever first mentioning the ride when Detective Eisen met Wendi at the Mosaic restaurant and then took her back to the TPD for an interview. The rest of this stuff has been mentioned before about the joke with Charlie and the TV being a divorce gift. But what is new is this last part right here. It should be noted that Wendi's mother, Donna Adelson, set a television repair appointment on July 11, 2014 for Wendi's television to be repaired on the morning of the homicide, July 18, 2014. Records obtained from Best Buy show a service was completed on her television the morning of July 18, 2014, the same date of the homicide. And you'll recall in Charlie's trial, that was when it was actually on questioning by Rashbaum that we learned it was indeed Wendi's mother, Donna, that made that appointment. If you recall, in prior testimonies, Wendi had suggested she had been the one to make that appointment. So this was the first time that we really saw for sure that it was Donna that made it, and it was 1 week before the homicide. And if you recall in my last video, I pointed out that on July 11th, 2014, Wendi and Harvey were, Donna and Harvey were in Tallahassee. They had just driven Wendi and the boys back up from the South Florida trip for Harvey's big birthday bash. And if you recall, Wendi even didn't want to see Dan when he came up to pick up the kids. And this was also the day that, the Friday before Dan's murder, that Donna made the appointment. Okay, so that's the first thing that's new in Donna's probable cause affidavit. The second thing that's new in Donna's probable cause affidavit is this right here. We already had indications in the others that, Jeff had this conversation that Jeff had with Wendi the week of the murder, that Wendi told him that her brother had looked into hiring a hitman and that would cost either $15,000 or $50,000. That's not new. But what is new is this portion here. Lacasse also reported that when he was visiting Charles Adelson with Wendi Adelson in the spring of 2013, Charlie Adelson bragged about being connected to a Cuban criminal element. And we did hear that come up in Charlie's trial. In fact, I remember Rashbaum at the end of I believe it was closing argument where Rashbaum was trying to suggest that neither Rivera or Sigfredo were Cuban, which I actually don't know that that's true, because I actually thought that Sigfredo was of partial Cuban descent. But in any event, that wasn't the point. The point was that Charlie bragged about having connections with a criminal element in South Florida, in Miami, which is not surprising because there's a large Cuban population in Miami. So, in any event, that's new. The next thing that's new is here. This, of course, is all new because this comes from Katie's proffer and Katie's testimony. So what's new here was that it was later confirmed by Catherine Magbanua that Charles Adelson enlisted Magbanua, who then enlisted the father of her two children, Sigfredo Garcia, to carry out this murder. Garcia enlisted Rivera's assistance, and Magbanua, Garcia, and Rivera were compensated for their actions. Magbanua was the only link between Markel and the shooters, Garcia and Rivera. Magbanua's only ties to Dan Markel are Charles Adelson and a couple of instances where she met Wendi Adelson. The only way Magbanua, Garcia, and Rivera knew of Dan Markel and his relationship with the Adelson family was through Charles Adelson. And again, this first time now that we have the conviction of Charlie, and this is, of course, everything that did come out in Charlie's trial, is that connection, that link, that, train car analogy that Georgia gave us. Okay, moving along. Again, most of this is the same, essentially. All the calls, the morning of the murder. But what we get new is here. This first part's not new. We know that once Garcia and Rivera arrived back at Miami, there was communications between Magbanua, Garcia, and Rivera together. And then, of course, we knew that Katie then thereafter talked with Charlie, and we believe went to Charlie's home for the evening, a night of the murder and before the drop-off of the money the next day. This all here, though, is new, and of course this came from Katie's testimony. Magbanua stated while at Charles Adelson's residence, Charles Adelson was armed and acting frantic. Charles told her his mother and father had just left his residence and left money that his mom had washed. At Adelson's trial, Magbanua testified that the money she received was damp and moldy, consistent with being physically washed, and was stapled into $1,000 stacks. Magbanua took a Xanax that was provided by Adelson and fell asleep. The next morning, 7/19/2014, at 9:44 a.m., Magbanua left the residence and was told by Adelson that the money was in the trunk of her car. And then, of course, Magbanua attempted to contact Garcia. So again, just adding those building blocks onto the case now that we have Charlie's conviction, Katie's testimony, and now another Adelson involved. And here, boom, we've got Donna and Harvey. This also is new as well. Communication records in Charles Adelson's iCloud show Donna Adelson telling Charles Adelson she was, quote, outside your house at approximately 8:59 p.m. on July 18, 2014. Cellular records for Donna Adelson and Harvey Adelson show an arrival time of 1:25 a.m. in Orlando, Florida, leaving an approximate hour and a half time block consistent with her being at Charles's residence. Donna and Harvey Adelson traveled to Orlando for the evening, then on to Tallahassee the following morning. So again, this was stuff that we learned in Charlie's trial. Remember the text messages about outside your house, and Charlie said 10 minutes away. And Charlie tried to explain that that was just Donna saying, I'm passing by on the highway. Hi, Charlie, outside your house, which is ridiculous. But also remember, Rashbaum asked Chris Corbett, who was the one that was testifying to this, do you know what time they arrived in Orlando? What's all the time frame in that? And remember, Chris Corbett said, well, I actually didn't map out all of that. but it's certainly something I can do. Well, it looks like, boom, cellular records show they arrived at 1:25 a.m. in Orlando, Florida. So my assumption is that after Chris Corbett's testimony, he and his team went back and took a look at those cell data records and towers and confirmed that. So I thought that was a nice follow-up from the trial. Okay, the next new thing in Donna's probable cause affidavit is about all of the very damaging Dolce Vita statements that we have now due to the enhanced Dolce Vita recording. And again, almost all of this is new because, of course, we know that the state, between the time of Katie's 2016 probable cause affidavit and, of course, by the time of her trial, Keith McElveen had been able to enhance that recording in 2022. I'm not going to go over all of these statements, but it's got our favorites. It's got the if they had any evidence, we would have already gone to the airport. And then, of course, how ironic is that Donna was arrested going to the airport. But again, most of this is new. In the 2016 probable cause affidavit, the amount of statements they were able to include was like maybe a page. This is over double of that. So it's the highlights. So anyway, of course, we now have that as new information. And again, going into this, most of this is not new. It's just basically showing the timeline from what happened after the bump, the Dolce Vita conversation, and of course, all the additional bumps, Donna's call with the undercover. Then we continue on into the time frame of Sigfredo being arrested, but boom, this is new. On May 26, 2016, electronic surveillance suggested that Charles Adelson and Catherine Magbanoa were in close proximity to each other and may have met in the overnight, early morning hours. Very interesting. I have not seen that before. So if you recall, of course, May 25, Sigfredo was arrested, and then Katie left, they had left the house the evening before on May 24th, and they never came back. So very interesting that we have this little tidbit here that was there a meeting between Charlie and Katie in person to talk about the fact that now we've got Sigfredo arrested. We know from the wiretaps on Fancy Fiction's channel that that Sigfredo's attorney, Jim Lewis, was talking with Katie during that time period when Sigfredo was still in Broward, waiting to be transported to Leon County. And remember, we had those wiretaps where basically it was suggesting that Jim Lewis had spoken to Charlie Adelson's lawyer and they weren't gonna talk. So I will link that wiretap from Fancy's channel in my description. I think you should go listen to it if you haven't heard it. But very interesting, I think. Now, the next new information, again, that was new from Katie's probable cause affidavit and today, is we have more detail here about Luis Rivera's proffer. So this was included in the prior probable cause affidavit, but there's a lot more detail here. For example, we've got more detail on the payouts, that Rivera was going to get 30 grand, the amount was going to be 100 grand. We've got more information here about the types of the gun. We've got information here about the piece of paper that Garcia had with the picture of Dan Markel and words written on it. This is new, the actual allocation of the money payout. This is new here, which the fact that when they were in Tallahassee, Sigfredo, shot a hole in the floorboard. And then, remember Shadrach Nobles had to take Sigfredo to AutoZone and they fixed it. And remember, this was really important cooperation testimony because this was something that TPD did not know about. And after Luis Rivera provided his proffer, they actually went back and corroborated that that Prius had a hole in the floorboard. So again, this is all new because it of course happened subsequently to the last 2016 probable cause affidavit we have. Okay, so the next new piece of information we have in Donna's probable cause affidavit is from our favorite Charlie Adelson ex-girlfriend, Junum Chinda. And of course, this is July of 18. This was all in that ever important interview that the investigators had with June. And thankfully they did, because, as we saw in her subsequent trial testimony, it's just extremely disappointing and backpedaling. The last trial was the worst, in my opinion. The backpedaling and the amount of times that Georgia had to bring up the transcript from this interview to June was just, it just shows again how important it was that they happened to catch her at a time where she seemingly wasn't under Charlie's spell and was being honest, frankly. And look at all the information we got from that interview, right? We've got the stapled money. We've got the fact that once Katie was arrested, Charlie was a changed person. He was very angry and agitated and nervous. Also the, confirmation that, Charlie had told June that he had given her Katie a car, and he had financed part of her breast augmentation. And of course, specific to our favorite grandma, we cannot forget, unfortunately, this didn't get in Charlie's trial. It for sure will get in Donna's trial, because it's called admission of a party opponent and an exception to the hearsay rule. But here, again, Junum Chinda also observed Donna Adelson to be stressed out during this time frame, and Donna Adelson made a statement to Junum Chinda that she felt Dan Markel was haunting her from the grave. So, bravo for them getting that interview. And another new star in our probable cause affidavit, I'm sure he's not real pleased, but anyway, Ryan Fitzpatrick makes an appearance here. In July 2021, contact was made with Ryan Fitzpatrick. During the interview with Fitzpatrick, it was learned the two had a falling out in recent years over financial disagreements. He said Charlie's entire demeanor changed when Magbana was arrested. Adelson started putting up security cameras and was constantly paranoid of arrest. During a conversation with Fitzpatrick, Charles Adelson said, "You can get away with murder if you keep your mouth shut." Fitzpatrick also stated he knows Charles staples his money together because he has received money from him in that manner. Fitzpatrick said Charles staples his money in $1,000 increments. So again, that's also new as well. And then to end, of course, the last part of the probable cause affidavit that's new for Donna is, of course, it continues the timeline. We've got the convictions of Garcia. We've got the enhancement of the Dolce Vita. We've got the convictions of Katie. And we've got Katie's proffers. And of course, we've got Charlie's trial and Charlie's conviction. And then, of course, we have this information, which I previously put on my community page, and it's been highly reported. But the fact that, one, that in Adelson's trial, Magbana testified that Adelson told her that his mother, Donna Sue, had just departed his residence at the time Magbana arrived on the night of the homicide. Magbana said the money she received appeared to have been washed. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the stuff that we learned recently about the jail calls after Charlie's guilty verdict included multiple calls in which Donna is telling Charles that she is getting things in order, creating trusts, making sure her grandchildren are taken care of. She discusses plans for unaliving herself, but also discusses plans to flee to a non-extradition country. And of course, she does have considerable financial resources to accomplish this. And then at the very end, in this probable cause affidavit, it ends with the fact of them booking the flights, the one-way flights to Vietnam via Dubai. So that is all that's new. And again, I think what we're seeing here in this probable cause affidavit and in the others that we're going to talk about is the evolution of the state's prosecution of the case. Each time we see one of these new documents, we see more information in black and white of the Adelsons' alleged involvement in the murder for hire of Dan Markel. Okay, warrants. So there's several warrants going on. We're going to start with the search warrant for Donna's iPhone that was seized from her person by Pat Sanford as part of her arrest. So here we go. Now in Florida, police can seize items within the arrestee's control incident to an arrest. However, police may not search the contents of a cell phone or an iPad, etc., as part of that search incident to arrest because smartphones contain such a large quantity of personal information. They therefore require a separate warrant before searching them generally. There could be circumstances where there's exigent circumstances to search, but generally you've got to get a separate warrant to actually search the phone. So that's why we have this November 14th warrant. So they seized it from her on the 13th, but Judge Everett granted it on the 14th. So that's why we have that. And that enables the Tallahassee Police Department investigators to search the contents of her phone that was seized at her arrest. Now, with respect to the warrant itself, there are a couple of things that I found interesting. First off, these first two sentences here it's information we know, but it's not appeared in any of the documentation we've seen thus far. So what it says is during the on-scene investigation of the reported incident, that's Dan's shooting, it was determined Markel was the divorced father of two children. The children were not present at the shooting, and their location was confirmed to be daycare at a locally licensed facility. Markel's ex-wife was identified as Wendi Adelson. Adelson was located at a local restaurant and contacted by investigators. Adelson was escorted to TPD and informed of the situation. So that part is new. And again, we've known that, but that's never actually appeared in the documentation. So I thought that was interesting. I still also am so curious on first of all, how the police figured out that she was at that Mosaic restaurant, and then what Detective Isom said to her to get her to come into the car, and then also the fact that she's a lawyer and she would just be like, okay. I don't know, just that whole thing is like, I hope someday we find out more about that. The other thing that is not necessarily new, but it's still coming up, and I thought this had been debunked. But here it says, during the investigation, it was also learned Adelson was the sole recipient of a large life insurance policy for Dan Markel. Adelson is the person who has the most to gain by the death of Markel. She would retain sole custody of the children, which is, again, what I kind of think was the driving point in getting those kids so that Donna can co-parent them. But it also said here that she would receive the benefits of a large life insurance policy due to his death. And that, guys, I don't know, let me know in the comments. I thought that was debunked. I know that the insurance policy is really for the children. I don't know, they keep putting it in here as if it's a financial motivator. And I'm curious on what you guys think. The next new thing in the probable cause affidavit for the warrant here for Donna's phone to search it was here, of course, the trial for Charlie. But this was also interesting. So they're talking here about, Katie testifying that Charlie had told her that his mother had just departed the residence at the time Magbano arrived on the night of the homicide. Magbano said the money she received appeared to have been washed. This was also interesting, though. She also stated Charles told her his mother, Donna, washed the money at their condo. This statement was made prior to July 18th, 2014, and Magbano recalled it being stated again on July 18, 2014, the date she received the money. So that suggests that there was conversation about this money and it being washed before that evening of the murder when Charlie, when Donna and Harvey allegedly dropped it off. And of course, Charlie put it in Katie's car the next morning. So I thought that was interesting. What do you guys think? Of course, the rest of this is new. I posted some of this on my community page, but I thought it'd be helpful to go through it in case you haven't seen it. This was first, the jail calls from Charlie Adelson's guilty verdict include multiple calls to Donna's cell. And of course, this was in the probable cause affidavit for her arrest, the fact that she's making plans, creating trusts, potential plans to unalive herself, but also plans to flee to a non-extradition country. This part about the one-way tickets with her and Harvey, that's not new. But this was new, and I posted this on my community page when I saw it. But I think this is very interesting. On Monday, November 13th, 2023, a friend of Charles Adelson contacted the state's attorney's office in Tallahassee. They advised Donna and Harvey contacted them Sunday, November 12th, 2023, regarding travel to the Philippines. The Adelsons advised they had travel plans to Saigon until November 20th, 2023, but no further plans at the time. The Adelsons were seeking travel advice for airlines as well as places to stay. This family friend has known the Adelsons for over 10 years and has never had longer than a 5-minute conversation with Donna or Harvey. They found the contact very strange. Harvey Adelson told the subject, "You must not mention to Charlie anything about our plans." So again, guys, one, of course, super shout out to whoever Charlie Adelson's friend was that called and did the right thing. Thank you, thank you. But also just bizarre that they keep having these phone conversations. But again, there's Harvey, guys. I mean, I know that of all the Adelsons, the one that's kind of the most, I guess it would be the person that we have maybe the least information on is Harvey. But as I mentioned in some of my prior videos, Harvey was involved in a lot of this stuff. I mean, Harvey was the one that was super upset at that party for their younger son. And he had to, remember in the text between Donna and Charlie, Harvey was so upset in his blood pressure, he had to walk out of the house. And, we found out from Wendi's divorce attorney that Harvey was at that relocation hearing as well as Donna. We've got Harvey and Charlie at the Mitsuri restaurant. So I don't know that I buy this whole Harvey's just an innocent, quiet guy that's, the breadwinner and the dentist and just kind of lets Donna run the show. I think Donna runs the show, but I am not yet convinced Harvey's such, an innocent bystander, so to speak. But again, this is all just my opinion. Then, of course, we've got this lovely piece of information, and this is what I want the video for. I mentioned I've requested it from the Miami Police Department. Still haven't received it. Unfortunately, it looks like from their correspondence that they're taking up to 6 months to comply with FOIA requests. So I don't know if I'm ever going to get this, but I really want the body cam footage of Donna's arrest because look at this picture. On Monday, November 13th, 2023 at approximately 8 p.m., Donna Adelson was taken into custody at Miami-Dade International Airport as she entered the jetway for her flight, which was an Emirates flight to Dubai. Donna was in possession of a cell phone at the time of apprehension. As Special Agent Pat Sanford attempted to seize her cell phone, Donna attempted to pull away and prevent him from grabbing it. Donna said she was told not to give her phone to law enforcement. Oh my God. What do you want to bet that was Charlie's bright-eyed advice there, huh? Now here is again, this is required in a search warrant. You have to provide in the application what you're specifically looking for. And so here is where the state lays that out. At this time, the state would be seeking a search warrant for Donna Adelson's cell phone for any applications or evidence of moving money, accessing financial accounts, or scheduling and booking travel plans to evade apprehension. Also, any documents, files, or other items pertaining to finances or financial adjustments made by the Adelsons, or other communications, photos, videos, or evidence related to the homicide of Dan Markel. So that's very broad. So basically, whatever is going to be on this phone, this is what they're looking for. This was granted, Donna was arrested on November 13th, and the search warrant was granted ultimately by Judge Everett on November 14th. Keep that date in mind, because we're now going to segue to the other search warrants. Okay, so now we've got a search warrant at the Adelson home, which led to search warrants of 2 iPhones and an Apple iPad. So we know here that I'm actually showing the search warrant for the iPad. And we know from this search warrant that on Tuesday, November 14, 2023, a search warrant was executed at the residence of Harvey and Donna Adelson. Now, I have not seen a copy of that specific search warrant of their home. But what this means is that there was a warrant issued to allow the police to enter and search, their property when they have reason to believe that there's evidence of crime inside the home. Now, that warrant needs to be specific, including the place to be searched, such as the condo, and items to be seized. Now, again, I don't have the search warrant for the home, but my assumption is it probably included things like electronic devices, because what it can't be is just vague, like searching for evidence of a crime. It has to be somewhat specific. And so my assumption is whatever is in that first search warrant for the home on Tuesday, November 14th, that we don't have on the docket, my assumption is what is described in that search warrant included these phones and the iPad. But what we do know is we have 3 additional search warrants on the docket, and therefore 2 iPhones and an iPad. And again, we need these search warrants, these separate search warrants, to search the contents of those 2 iPhones and iPad that were seized from Harvey Adelson. Now, on the iPhones, we can assume probably at least one of the phones is Harvey's. One was gray and one was white. I assume the gray one was probably Harvey's. But it doesn't mean that all of these devices are, quote, Harvey's in the sense that he was the one primarily using it. It's just that it was seized from him because because Donna was in jail on Tuesday, November 14th. So for example, the iPad could be Donna's and Harvey's, or just Harvey's. Remember, Donna and Harvey use the same Gmail address. Maybe they use the same single iPad. I don't know. In my family, my mom has her own iPad and my dad has his own iPad. But in any event, we know that in the home, the police were able to seize 2 iPhones and an iPad. And of course, then we have the subsequent warrants. Now, these 3 warrants for the iPad and the 2 iPhones are virtually identical in substance to the warrant for Donna's iPhone, other than the identifiers. I mean, obviously, this one for the iPad, it specifically says it took it from Harvey and here's its serial number. But other than that, substantively, the warrants are all the same. So I'm not going to really go through these warrants in detail. But I will tell you what I think is interesting, and that is the date of the search warrant. So we're going to go down here, and I'm going to show you this. This search warrant was applied for on November 28th, and it was granted by Judge Everett on November 29th. Now remember, as I just mentioned, the search of the home was on November 14th, the day after Donna's arrest. Now, what my assumption is that the police And then remember, Donna's iPhone, that warrant was granted on November 14th. So my assumption is that the police started with a search of Donna's iPhone that was authorized in that November 14th warrant. And then they spent those 2 weeks going through that, Sergeant Corbett and his team. And then they probably uncovered information in that iPhone to then basically go ahead and prompt them to then go ahead and apply for these 3 search warrants. Because again, they had the items in their possession as of November 14th when they seized them from Harvey. It's just that they didn't apply for the warrant to actually dig in until November 28th, which was granted on November 29th. So we're moving along. And so I just thought that was interesting. And again, what they're going to be looking for is similar to what they were looking for in Donna's iPhone. This was the iPad. Again, June 2012 to present. And it's going to be, further the investigation into Donna and any crimes related to that, including things that happened before, as well as identifying other subjects that would have carried out the act with her, and outstanding evidence, etc. So I think what I expect to be occurring next is that the TPD is now going through all of these devices, and then there's going to be a bunch of follow-up warrants for additional information to other entities. Like I said, for sure, they're going to be requesting information from Apple for the iCloud. They're going to be asking information for cellular phone providers to get those call data records. They're going to be looking into any apps that might be on those phones, etc. So Facebook, etc. So, and I think as a final comment on, what could they possibly get from these devices that are presumably new or, maybe a year or 2 old, right? And I would say, yes, sure. First of all, they've got the actual physical devices. So they're going to be able to, do the work to get, into the forensic analysis of the actual device, which is helpful. But I also would say that just because you have a new phone doesn't mean you don't have old data on it. For example, I'm an iPhone user, and whenever I get a new iPhone, I always just update and copy what's from my prior physical phone to my new one, because who wants to do all that stuff all over again? Do you buy a new iPhone and just start over brand new? No, most people transfer everything over. And so, my phone right now has things on it from 2010, 2012. So I would just caution on that. We know that there's a lot of information they can find out from iCloud. And as like I said, I think that's the next step, is they'll be, reaching out to Apple and all these other providers to get that information now that they have the phones to start with. So I would just caution that, maybe they were smart and they don't have anything on these phones, and maybe they've cleaned up their iCloud, and maybe there's nothing there other than possibly, what's been going on recently. But I don't know. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. But thank you again so much for joining. I have a couple of Markel videos planned, and I'm also starting a new case. I'm going to be covering the Brightigan matter. But I also have a couple of ideas from Markel to wrap up of some things that I observed during the trial. That'll be forthcoming. And thank you so much for joining. I apologize again for the delay. I got really sick over Thanksgiving, and just now kind of starting to feel like a human again. But I appreciate everyone's support, and I hope to see you in my next one. Thanks. Bye.